welcome to video podcast number 37. Thank you for joining me once again. A little warning, if you happen to hear me sniffling and or coughing, I think I might be in the early stages of a summer cold. I know last night and earlier this morning I was doing a lot of sniffling and coughing. So, as always, if you want to give me public feedback, below, as usual, below. All my relevant and important links are in the description section below. Speaking of my comment section, I've given this warning a handful of times already. And I saw it going on with my last video podcast. And I had to block at least one person this morning. Don't ever come in my comment section telling another person in my comment section what they can or can't post or what they should or shouldn't post. That's my job. I'm the only one who has the authority in my comment section to tell people what they can and cannot post and what they should and should not post. Not you. Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that again. Not too many people have been guilty of that, but I've seen it every blue moon. But I saw it in my most recent comment section. A male YouTube user was telling one of my female YouTube users that she didn't have a right to be here. She shouldn't even be commenting in my comment section, and she needed to go. That's not your place to tell anybody that. I don't, unlike some other YouTube channels that promote themselves as being exclusively for male YouTube users, I'm not one of those. I welcome women. Now, I will say most of my content is directed at single heterosexual men. So in that sense, I don't know if women would necessarily be interested in most of my content. But I don't exclude women from posting in my comment section. If women have some feedback they want to give me, ask me a question or whatever, I allow women to come into my comments. Again, I got to make this clear for the millionth time, man. Compared to other men who have YouTube channels in the manosphere, I am not anti-woman like some of you guys are. See, there's a lot of guys on YouTube that are essentially anti-woman. I don't look at women as like the enemy. That's never been me. That's never been me. I don't look at women as like some type of adversary or rival. That's never been me. That's never been me. So, yeah, not to belabor the point, but yeah, just simply for future reference, if you come into my comment section and say either another male poster says something that you don't care for, or even more so, a woman says something that you don't care for, just disagree with. Just simply say, hey, I disagree with your opinion, or I disagree with your assertion, or whatever. But don't say, get out of here. What is a woman doing in here anyway? You shouldn't even be in here. No, I don't play that shit. I will block you. I will block you. I don't play that shit, man. Because my attitude, number one, is, and see, this is why I've been teasing certain factions of MGTOW and other related type guys. If you're anti-female, why the fuck you listening to me anyway? That's what I want to know. Why the fuck you listening to me anyway? I don't promote any things in my books that's anti-female. Even Possibility of Sex, which is probably my book that's the most harshly critical of aspects of women's behavior, I wouldn't even categorize that book as anti-female. And see, that's why I mentioned in my last video and one other video that I think a lot of MGTOW type guys misinterpreted that book. Some guys, not only just MGTOW, but guys who don't necessarily categorize themselves as MGTOW, they looked at that book as a book where I was almost disparaging women. No, the essence of the possibility of sex was to highlight that there are many women that can be very misleading and manipulative in their interactions. I always got to touch my face when I do a video podcast. Some on my eyelash. Yeah, the point of that book, The Possibility of Sex, was to highlight that there's a lot of women who can be very misleading and manipulative when they interact with men, and particularly men who they're not really sexually attracted to. And so I was making men aware of the fact that if I had to try, I don't like too much to try to sum up my books, because to me, if I could sum up my book in 1 or 2 sentences, then my book would be 1 or 2 sentences. So, people always say, how can you sum up your book in, like, say, 2 or 3 sentences? My attitude is, if I could easily sum up my book in 2 or 3 sentences, my book would be 2 or 3 sentences long. But in my attempt to sum up that book, The Possibility of Sex, the thing you got to remember about women, and this relates to my archetype known as the manipulative time waster, there are a lot of women in society who are not interested in having sex with men, either at all or at minimum they have a less than average interest in having sex with men. But because you have an entertaining personality, you're emotionally empathetic to their problems, and or you're financially generous, they're not going to straightforwardly tell you that they're not interested in you. They're not. They're going to look to exploit you. Either exploit you for your non-sexual, purely platonic attention and companionship, or they're going to exploit you to gain access to your financial resources and material possessions. And so that's the main thing I point out in that book, The Possibility of Sex. Is that basically just because a woman is giving you the misleading impression that she's genuinely attracted to you romantically and sexually doesn't mean she is. But nothing in that book suggested that I'm anti-woman. And speaking of these air quotes, somebody wrote a comment in my comment section saying that I tend to use all my fingers. I said, Alan, you're using too many fingers when you do your air quotes. You use damn near your whole hand. No, I try to do just these 2 fingers for the quotes, but sometimes these other my secondary fingers kind of, I guess, come up a little bit. Speaking of feedback, I'll start off with feedback. And and again, if you want to give me private feedback, you can write me through my YouTube pages, as well as at coaching@mode1.net. coaching@modeone.net. Now, I still got somebody gonna be mad at me. I went to the grocery store yesterday, and there was about 12 bottles of my favorite flavor, Shine. Strawberry lemonade, Shine. I bought all 12 bottles. Stuff. Yeah, I bought all 12 bottles, man. Okay, this video is going to return to my previous format, where I'm going to leave about the first 20 to 25 minutes for free for the general public, and the remaining 35 to 40 minutes will be exclusively for my Patreon subscribers, $5 level and up. $5 level and up. I'll start off with just feedback on my last video podcast number 36A. 36A. The A stands for addendum. Now, it's funny. I always remark how if people don't know you in real life and they just know you via the internet, in particular people who are brand new listeners and viewers of yours, they tend to trip when they see a side of you that they've never seen before. For example, about 3 video podcasts ago, I showed you my angry side, or what I also refer to as my, for lack of a better term, my street nigga side. A lot of people tripped off that. Male and females tripped on that side. So now, with my last video podcast 36A, I had a lot of people tripping on 2 things, 2 aspects of my behavior. A lot of people primarily tripped on, a lot of people didn't know I had a funny side to me, which is surprising to me because if you've even looked at my Wikipedia page once, you'll see in my biographical information, I actually used to do stand-up comedy. I didn't do it long, though. And some of my friends were disappointed when I kind of abruptly quit. But I only did it for about 15, 16 months or so. But to toot my horn a little bit, in the 15, 16 months I did stand-up comedy, I left an indelible impression on the Chicago metropolitan area. Like both the Chicago in late 1989, early 90, Chicago Tribune and Chicago Sun-Times actually labeled me the top up-and-coming comic in the city of Chicago. And along with that, I won one of the top comedy contests for up-and-coming comics. They used to run it for years. I don't think they still have it. It's called the Miller Lite Beer Stand-Up Comedy Search. Yeah, Miller Lite Beer used to have a bunch of contests in all the major cities. They would have one in New York. Matter of fact, if you're familiar with the TV actor Ray Romano, he won the same contest I won in Chicago in New York the same year I did, in 1989. He won the Miller Lite New York City Stand-Up Comedy Search Contest. I won the 1989 Miller Lite Chicago Stand-Up Comedy Search Contest. Yeah, they had one in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and I want to say 1 or 2 other cities. But yeah, I won. Matter of fact, if you remember Bernie Mac, who was part of the Kings of Comedy, he unfortunately passed away because of an illness. He had his own show on Fox. Yeah, me and Bernie Mac used to be real cool. He won the same contest I won the year after I did. I won in 1989 and he won in 1990. Matter of fact, that's when I first met him. I first met Bernie Mac, I want to say the night I won my contest. He came up to me and he was really complimentary. He was real cool brother. But he was like, damn, man, you are a funny motherfucker. He was like, your comedy is very original. That's what he told me. He said, Alan, you have a lot of original comedy. Who else was I familiar? Damon Wayans, who I just ran into not too long ago when I was in Los Angeles. Last time I was in Los Angeles. He used to be a mentor of mine. Yeah. Damon Wayans of the infamous Wayans brothers family. Yeah. I used to be real cool with Damon. There was a comic named Robin Harris, who I used to be cool with. We used to talk on the phone a lot. He unfortunately, matter of fact, he passed away a few months after I opened up for him. Yeah, I opened up for Robin Harris. He was known for this bit called Bebe's Kids. And I opened up for him like a month into doing comedy. I had only been doing like stand-up comedy like about 1 month. when I open up for him. And he also complimented me. He liked my material. I didn't have a lot of material at that time. See, that's the thing about material. When you're a comic, a lot of times, man, it takes you months and years to build up your material. Material is something you kind of got to build up. You know, I was talking about that in relation to being here on YouTube, man. There's a lot of YouTube hosts that are starved for content. They're starved. That's why you have a lot of what I call content thieves and content moochers. There's a lot of YouTube hosts that will mooch off of other people's content because they starve for content. But yeah, that's what happens in the comedy world. Like, there's been comics who have gotten into fights because they saw other comics basically steal their material. Some people would steal their material verbatim, and other people would steal like the theme of their content, and then they would put their own comedic spin on it. Matter of fact, I mentioned Damon Wayans, man. At the contest that Bernie Mac won in Chicago in 1990, there was this comic who was a contestant in the contest that was stupid enough. He did one of Damon's bits in the contest, and Damon was the fucking host of the contest. Man, Damon came from backstage. Man, I thought Damon, seriously, I thought Damon was going to steal on your boy, man. Damon was hot. He was about to steal on your boy, man. I was one of the guys who had to calm him down, man. Dude, because this dude was just blatantly stealing his shit. And Damon was like, yeah, there's been a lot of well-known, anybody familiar with the world of stand-up comedy, they know that. See, the reason why people steal shit is like, I did a video podcast about, I briefly touched on things like copyrights, trademarks. See, that's the thing about being here on YouTube, man. Well, one advantage I have, I use a lot of content from my books. And a lot of content of my books is copyrighted. So people, anything that's copyrighted, people can't blatantly steal. Anything that's trademarked, people cannot blatantly steal without risking being sued. But when you're expressing non-copyrighted material, which is something most stand-up comics do, people could just steal your shit. Like, matter of fact, if you remember that there was this MTV personality that I kind of got into it on Twitter about the whole delineations between alpha male and beta male. I saw a video where she was commenting on that on YouTube. Like, she basically said she doesn't like YouTube for that very reason. She said the thing about doing YouTube is that because most of the content you express in YouTube, you can't really technically copyright it. She said it's too easy for people to just blatantly steal your shit. Or matter of fact, I had one guy, and he's a follower of mine. And if you're watching this video, you know who you are. But I ain't mad at you because you did apologize to me. You did. This guy did apologize to me. But I had at least one guy, man, that I mean just blatantly stole my whole podcast. Like, he talked about the same exact subject matter in his podcast that I talked about in my podcast, but he initially presented it as if it was his own shit. And I saw it on his podcast, and I wrote a note to him. I said, dude, man, you can't just be stealing my shit like that. I came up with that shit, man. You can't act like... I mean, it's one thing if he had started off his podcast saying, I'm going to talk about something that I heard dating coach Alan Roger Currie talk about on his podcast, and I just wanted to add some of my own commentary to what he talked about. You know, people do that all the time. But you can't just take something that I talk about and act like it's original from your own mind. The fuck? But again, to his credit, this follows credit. He genuinely apologized. And later on, he edited his podcast to give me credit. So I ain't mad at him no more. But Yeah, that's the tricky thing, man. And see, that's kind of somewhat related to my last podcast. What I talked about in my very last video podcast about the other YouTube hosts that I've been having, I really don't like to call it a beef, but for lack of a better word, the beef with. I was saying that that's one of his objectives with me. That's one of the reasons, that's actually, you could say, what caused the beef. Is, again, to put it in simple terms, I told him in a non-antagonistic manner, you could say basically in a nice, respectful manner, that I didn't want him mentioning my name anymore in his podcast, and I didn't want him promoting my books anymore, endorsing and or promoting my books anymore in his podcast. And initially he said he wasn't. He even said in an angry tone, emphatically via email, he was basically like, you can rest assured I will never mention your name and never mention your books again. But then he turned around and did that. And again, as I pointed out, I don't want to rehash the last video too much, but one of the things he pointed out, I mean, one of the objectives I pointed out in my video podcast, one of the reasons why I think he didn't want to totally avoid mentioning my name on my books, if nothing else, is because talking about me and my books contributed to a lot of his content. I would say, over the last year and a half or so, I would say no less than 20 to 25% of the content in his video podcast was either directly or indirectly related to me and my books. So essentially, by me telling him I don't want him to talk about me or my books would be like asking him to eliminate roughly 20 to 25% of his content. And again, most YouTube hosts are very content starved. Like, matter of fact, O'Shea Duke Jackson, who I mentioned in the last video, he's the editor-in-chief of the Negro Manosphere. That's why he first encouraged me to get on YouTube. There was a few people that encouraged me to get on YouTube. Actually, the very first person was my brother years ago. And then I would say the second person was one of my frat brothers, a guy named Tim Beverly. We call him Big Bad Bev. I remember he told me it was 2012. Yeah, he told me back in 2012, I was in Los Angeles. We was hanging out in Los Angeles. And he said, Alan, you need to get on YouTube. He was basically like, fuck Blog Talk Radio. You should be on YouTube. And I kind of blew it off. But in those few months right before I got on YouTube, the main person who was encouraging me to get on YouTube was O'Shea Duke Jackson. And, one of the reasons why he said, Alan, you definitely should be on YouTube because you're not a person who has to depend on other people's material and subject matter for your content. He said, you're a content creator. You'll hear that term used by a lot of YouTube hosts. They'll divide people into content created. And I would say that's generally true. I would almost loosely generalize YouTube hosts into three categories: content creators, content moochers, and content thieves. Those would be my three categories. Other people might have their own categories, but that would be my three categories of people on YouTube. A content creator is somebody who doesn't have to talk about stuff that he's heard somebody else talk about. Most, if not all, of his content is original stuff from his own mind, and if he's a book author, from his own books, or if he's a blogger, from his own blogs. So the vast majority of his content is original stuff. Content moocher is, again, I mentioned that earlier, that's when a guy will take the general themes and the primary topics that's from somebody else, but they'll present their own original spin on it. So they won't just blatantly rip somebody out. you know, they'll just, like, if they heard somebody else talking about women who have babies out of wedlock, they'll take that subject, that topic, but they'll put their own spin on it versus what the other host who they heard talk about it, how they presented it. That's what I call a content moocher. A content thief is when you come as close to just verbally plagiarizing someone, where you almost talk about someone else's exact same talking points completely. You take almost all of someone else's talking points and you talk about those talking points yourself. That's what I call a content thief. I would say the largest percentage out of those three groups that I've seen on YouTube is the content moochers. People who steal other people's themes and topics, but then they put their own spin on it. And, but yeah, the rarest group is the content creators. People who just come up with their own original content. But anyway, going back to my main thing I was talking about. Damn, I'm already at 27 minutes? God damn, time flies. Okay, I ain't going to be talking too much longer about for the free portion because I want to save at least 50% of this video for my Patreon subscribers. But I was saying how, yeah, a lot of people didn't know I had a funny side. Yeah, a lot of what I did in my last video, I utilized what's known as parody humor. Most of the humor you heard in my last video was what's known as parody humor. And what that means, like the #1 show that's most known for that would be NBC's Saturday Night Live. Just about all their skits center around parody humor. Parody humor is when you're either impersonating an individual person or you're impersonating a type of person and you exaggerate their personality quirks and their behavioral tendencies to the point where it's funny. Like, for example, Melissa McCarthy, speaking of Saturday Night Live, she had a skit where she was doing a parody of the former White House press secretary, Sean Spicer. And Sean Spicer is known for chewing gum. He loves to chew gum. So in her parody of him, she put like 10 sticks of gum in her mouth at the same time to highlight the fact that he loves to chew gum. That's what's known as parody humor. And that's what I did with this YouTube host that I had disagreements with. I did basically a parody of him. Yeah. And a lot of people were tripping off my myriad of voices. I've always been known for that since I was a little kid. Like when I was actually a little kid, my older brother used to call me Rich Little Jr. Most of the young people wouldn't even know who Rich Little is, but Rich Little was probably the most well-known impersonator in Hollywood. Like he could mimic people's voices in general mannerisms. I'm trying to think who's well known in today's comedy world for impersonations. Like Dave Chappelle, he knows how to imitate types of people. More so, he doesn't so much do as many individual impersonations as much as he knows how to impersonate types of people, particularly types of black people. And I know how to do that myself. Matter of fact, somebody in my comment section referred to me as he said, man, Alan, you like the Dave Chappelle of YouTube. Because, yeah, I used to do like when I was in college in my fraternity. That was one of my claim to fames in my fraternity. I was the #1 guy in my fraternity who knew how to impersonate my fellow frat brothers. I used to, like, guys sometimes would just circle around me and they'd be like, come on, Alan, man, do so-and-so again, man. Imitate so-and-so again, man. Damn, man, you got him down, man. You got him down. Yeah, so that was like when I did stand-up comedy, that was a lot of my humor, was impersonation type humor. Like I was not really a roaster. There's different types of stand-up comics. Like a lot of black comics, they're roasters. Like Robin Harris, who I mentioned at the open up for, he was a roaster. He knew how to roast people. Like O'Shea Duke Jackson here on YouTube, he's good at that. He's good at roasting people. He has good roasting humor. I can roast from time to time, but that's not my specialty. My specialty was more so impersonating people. And speaking of impersonating people, excuse me, I told you my voice, you hear how scratchy it is? I think I'm coming down with a cold. Next to people noticing that I had a good sense of humor, the second thing I got a lot of feedback on, and really, if people read my books and they're a long-time follower of mine, they should have already known this trait about me. I'm almost insulted that people are suggesting that they just realized this trait about me. But next to compliments about my sense of humor, the second most compliments I get, people were telling me both publicly and privately, they said, Alan, I can tell by the way you explain that situation with your disagreeing with this other YouTube host, you have a keen sense of reading people. You know how to read people's, like, their ulterior motives, and you know how to read people's manipulative tactics. And again, that's almost one of those things I'm flattered by that compliment. But if people are just now discovering that, I'm almost insulted by that. I mean, I talk about that in one of my books. My second paperback ever was called Upfront and Straightforward. Let the manipulative game players know what you're really thinking. Hey, what is that? Nat? And one of the things I talk about in that book, I kind of lightheartedly toot my horn about, is I say, just like people have been telling me the last 36, 48 hours or so, 72 hours, I say in that book, I say I have a very keen sense of reading people. Matter of fact, one thing I point out in the book is I use this, I don't know how many of you used to watch this show on Showtime. It was called Californication, with this actor named David Duchovny, who gained fame playing Mulder, Fox Mulder on the X-Files. And in the show Californication, he played this writer who lived in Los Angeles, who was having his challenges both with his career as well as he was having a lot of love life related challenge. Basically, he wanted to hook up with his ex-girlfriend, who was also his baby mama, his daughter's mama, but she didn't really want to hook up back with him because she felt like he was too promiscuous, even though she had cheated on him. The reason they had broken up was not because he had cheated on her, but it was because she had cheated on him, but yet her criticism of him was that he was too promiscuous. Which he was. He was very promiscuous in the show. Anyway, there was this one scene, I think it was either episode 1 of season 1 or episode 2 of season 1. It was one of those two, where his literary agent was also one of his closest friends. And his literary agent tried to set him up on a blind date with this chick, this blonde chick. So they were at this restaurant. It was David Duchovny's character. I forget what his name. Oh, Hank Moody was his character's name. It was Hank Moody, Hank Moody's literary agent, who was also one of his closest friends. Can't remember his name on the show. The literary agent's wife, and this blind date. And so during the course of the conversation, during dinner, the woman says, so you're a writer, huh? And Hank Moody's like, yeah. And she says, I heard writers are very observant and very perceptive, which is generally true. Most writers are, particularly novelists, but I would say most writers are. And he said, yeah, Hank was like, yeah, I'm gonna say that's true. And so she said a couple like really smart, alecky comments to him that you could tell were getting him a little irritated. And then she said, well, if you're so observant and perceptive, like, what do you perceive about me right now? And the his friend, the literary agent, immediately was like, no. Like, do not ask Hank that question. And they told Hank, they was like, Hank, do not answer that. Do not answer that. Because they knew how Hank was. They knew how Hank was. So they tried to stop him. But, of course, he was already irritated because she had made some smart, alecky comments. So sure enough, he said, okay. And he begins to make assessments on this woman. And you could tell by her facial reactions when he made an assessment that was very valid and on point. Because she would kind of frown. Like if he offered an assessment that really wasn't on point, she would just kind of either smile or look indifferent. But when he made points that were on point, she would kind of begin to frown. And yeah, I can't remember all the comments he made, but like a few of the comments he made about her, he said, here's my assessment of you. You impressed me as a woman who ended up going to a college that her family really couldn't afford, like University of Southern California. And she went, like, she kind of made a face like, that could be true, could not be true. He said, and when you were young, you were the fat chick. You didn't have too many female friends, and hardly any of the men hit on you because you were the fat chick. But then you were always the fat chick with the cute face, the woman that everybody would say, God, if she lost weight, she'd be a looker because she got such a cute face. And then guess what happened? You lost weight. And then you gained more female friends, as well as you gained more attention from men. But most of the men you dealt with just treated you like a one-night stand or a weekend fling. They fucked you and then they left you alone. And that hurts you because you were looking for the boyfriend. You were looking for the knight in shining armor. But you were just mainly the woman that guys just wanted to fucking get the dick sucked and then leave alone. And so you're still looking for that knight in shining armor. And the reason you're on this date is because you think I'm going to be that guy. I'm not. Because I'm going to be the guy that's also going to fucking die. Now again, that's what wasn't his exact dialogue, but I'm very much paraphrasing. But those were some of the points he made about her, man. She got so agitated by his valid assessments of her that she just got up from the table and left. And anyway, the reason I bring up that story, I point out that in my book, Upfront and Straightforward, because I've literally done that type of shit. Like my close friends can tell you, I've done that type of shit. What Hank Moody did at that table, I have literally done almost that exact same thing with women. I remember one time I was in grad school, I did that. I was hanging out with some classmates, and one of my female classmates introduced me to one of her girlfriends. And she put me in that situation. This woman was talking to me, and my girlfriend mentioned, she said, Alan, one thing about him, it started with you notice how if you watch me on video a lot of times, even though I'm looking at you through webcam, so it's not like you right in front of me, but you'll notice I just sometimes just look at you. Or more specifically, I just stare into the webcam. Well, if you think I do that on my video podcast show, if you were to meet me in person, trust me, that's the number one thing most people trip off of me. Because, again, my brother, one thing he has said about me, he said, bro, you're like a sponge. And that relates to my comedic talent of impersonating people. Because when I meet people, what I do is I soak them in. I absorb their essence. I give you, this might not be the best analogy, but if you saw the movie The Terminator, and I know my free portion is going longer, so Patreons, trust me, your portion is coming, and it will be no less than a half hour. But if you saw the movie The Terminator, when they would show things as Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, from his perspective, even though he was a computer, so it's not really a good analogy. He wasn't a human being, but he was a computer. But the first thing he would do whenever he would come in contact with human beings is he would electronically read them. He would almost read everything about them. How fast they bat their eyes, their body temperature, whether they move their right hand more or their left hand more. He would just read everything about them and record it. So if he needed to later mimic that person or impersonate that person, he would know how to do so. Well, figuratively speaking, that's what I do. That's what I do. Like whenever I meet people, really I would say in general, both men and women, but I would say a little bit more so women. Sometimes what I'm known for doing that people have noted and teased me about, when I meet you, I'll just spend like at minimum a few seconds, if not a couple minutes, just staring at you. Like people say, wow, what's wrong with this Allen guy? He's just like, looks like he's just staring at me. Like I've had some guys get a little ruffled, like they thought I was what's known as mean mugging them. You know, looking at them like I want to start some shit with them. But I stare at people because I read people. And if I say so myself, I read people very well. Like one thing I read from the outset, from the time I meet a person, is if you're what I would call a genuine person or a real and authentic person versus a person who's very phony and full of shit. I pick up on that like that. That's probably the first trait I can pick up on in a person, is if you're a genuine, real, authentic type person, or if you're just a phony, fake, full of shit type person. I can read it, even sometimes without you saying anything, just looking at you, like looking at your eyes. Like I said on the previous video podcast, with men, like I'll tell you another type of man I can identify is a man who's a genuine ladies' man / womanizer versus a guy who's pretending to be. I can tell guys like that. Sometimes I can tell that just over the internet, but definitely in person. I can tell that shit. I can tell when I'm around a guy who's a genuine ladies' man / womanizer versus a guy who's pretending to be, but he's not. But yeah, I've done that. What Hank Moody did in that episode of Californication, there's been at least a handful of times I've done that with women in real life, where I told them, even though I didn't know anything about these women, I ended up telling them things about their backstory that almost made them think that I was psychic or something. They was like, how the fuck would you know that? Like, how the hell would you ever know that about me? Seriously, I mean, I'm literally like, there's been a couple times I freaked women out. They were like literally like, how would you know that? And see, here's a tip where I always tell the men, this is why you should interact with as many women as possible. I always tell men, even if you get rejected by a bunch of women, which is going to be most of my subject matter for my Patreon subscribers, so stay tuned. It's going to center around rejection. But that's why I tell men to interact with. See, when you're a guy who's a hermit or a recluse and you really don't interact with a lot of people, that's when you don't really develop your ability to read people. If you're a guy who just always stays at your home and watch TV and your only interaction with people is through the internet, you ain't going to really get a good sense on how people are, and particularly on how women are. See, one of the reasons I read people so well is because I've interacted with so many people in my life. I've interacted with just thousands and thousands of people. So when you interact with people so many times, you begin to get a good read on people. Your ability to read them is very quick. So yeah, so for those people who wrote me those comments, both publicly and privately, about Alan, man, you really know how to, I can tell you're a person that knows how to read people. I'm kind of like, duh. I mean, I appreciated the compliment, don't get me wrong, but I was almost like, you didn't know that about me already? Particularly as relates to my books. If you notice, in most of my books, next to my emphasis on helping men improve their verbal communication skills and their verbal seduction skills, probably my second most point of emphasis is helping men quickly and effectively identify when they're dealing with a woman who has a high degree of manipulative tendencies. A high degree of manipulative tendencies. See, I tend to generally categorize all people, both men and women, into manipulative people and non-manipulative people. Manipulative people and non-manipulative people. What's the general difference between the two? If you read my book, Mode 1, both the original and my updated version, and remember, I do have an updated version that was #1 on Amazon in the category of communication skills. Damn. This is going to be the longest free portion ever. Yeah, this normally, I think my previous longest was 30 minutes. So I'm up to 47, 48 minutes. So this might go an hour. The free portion might go an hour. But again, I'm guaranteeing my Patreon subscribers at minimum at least 30 minutes of additional content. At least 30 minutes of additional content for my $5 subscribers and up. I just want to say a few things about manipulation, and then I'll wrap up this free portion. Yeah, the general difference, here's the general difference between manipulative people and non-manipulative people. I say in my book, Mode 1, what's the starting point of everything to do with two people interacting with each other? What's the starting point? I say everything starts with asking the question, what do you want from that other person? What do you want from that other person? Because see, here's what a lot of people will try to have you believe. Like you'll ask people, you know, hey, Joe, why were you interacting with Cindy? And Joe might say, oh, you know, just for the heck of it. I just, you know, had some time to pass, you know. That's bullshit. Nobody interacts with anybody just for the hell of it. Trust me when I say that. Nobody interacts with anybody just for the hell of it. Whether it's members of their own gender or members of the opposite gender. Nobody interacts with anybody just for the hell of it. When you interact with anybody, you're looking to gain something of either tangible value from that person or something of intangible value from that person. One of those two. Anytime you interact with another human being, you are looking to gain either something of tangible value or something of intangible value. If you're not familiar with those two terms, I'll break it down. Tangible means something you can see, feel, and touch. Something you can see, feel, and touch. That would be something of tangible value. 2 to 3 examples of tangible value would be like you're interacting with a woman because you want sex from her. That means sex would be something of tangible value. You're interacting with another man because you want money from him or an employment opportunity from him. That's something of tangible value. You got a buddy and you're interacting with him because you want to borrow his car for the weekend while he's out of town or something. Or you visiting him and you hungry and you smell him cooking food and you want him to share his food with you. Those will be things of tangible value. Intangible value is when you want something from someone such as love, respect, flattery, comical entertainment, emotional empathy, knowledge, wisdom, insight, and advice, something I provide to a lot of you guys on this YouTube channel. So things that you more so absorb mentally and emotionally, or one other thing, something that's going to directly or indirectly contribute to your degree of social status and your image and reputation would be representative of intangible value items. Intangible value items. So the thing you gotta always be real with yourself is anytime you interact with anybody, whether it's one of your parents, one of your siblings, one of your children, one of your friends, one of your acquaintances, one of your business colleagues, etc., you always want something. You always want something. Don't ever lie to yourself and say, oh, I'm interacting with this person, I don't want anything from them. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. For you to even tell yourself that shit, that's bullshit. You always want something from somebody. That's one of the things I say in my book, Mode 1. You always want something from someone. Again, you either want something in the short run or the long run of tangible value, or you want something in the short run or the long run of intangible value. You want one of those two things. Like I would use myself as that. Most of the people who come to my YouTube channel, they either want one of two things usually. They either want to be, at minimum, they want to be entertained. If nothing else, people come to my YouTube channel because they want to be entertained. And most of my clients and potential clients, they want to absorb knowledge, wisdom, insight, and advice from me. Knowledge, wisdom, insight, and advice from me. So both of those things will fall into the category of something I'm presenting to people of intangible value. So that's the starting point. You always want something from somebody. Always. Now, as that relates to manipulation, the main way people tend to deviate into two categories, starting with what they want from people, is how honest they are about what they want. If you want ABC from someone or XYZ from someone, and you're willing to let them know that in an upfront, specific, and straightforwardly honest manner, that means you're a non-manipulative person. It means you're a non-manipulative person. So, for example, if you're a heterosexual man and you meet a woman you're attracted to and you want her sexual companionship, and you tell her straightforwardly up front, the reason I'm talking to you is because ultimately I want to have sex with you. That would mean you're exhibiting non-manipulative behavior. If you had a male friend who happened to be wealthy and you were having some financial struggles and you told that male friend, hey, you know, Jonathan, I got to be real. One of the reasons I keep calling you so much and you keep getting so many emails from me because, quite frankly, I need to borrow some money from you. I need some money from you. And I was wondering if you could help me out because I got a lot of financial struggles. See, that would be you exhibiting non-manipulative behavior. Manipulative people, what they do is they tend, at minimum, to be vague and ambiguous with people about what they want from them. At minimum, they're very vague and ambiguous with people about what they want from them. And even more so, they tend to be flat out misleading and even blatantly dishonest about the fact that they want something from that person. They try to temporarily or indefinitely hide, deny, or camouflage what it is they really want from that person. That's what they do. See, and if I had to make one more reference to my last video podcast when I was talking about my situation with this other YouTube host. See, that's the number one way this person was being a combination of disingenuous and manipulative with me. And I think he didn't realize that I could see through it. But he would always offer to promote my books and act like he was doing it out of the goodness of his own heart. But really, what he really wanted, if nothing else, was he wanted to use my books as source material or reference material to be used as to contribute to his talking points. Basically, in other words, he wanted to use me and my books to contribute to the content of his show. Because again, I mentioned most YouTube hosts are content hungry. They're content starved. They need content, just like in mainstream media. Most TV talk shows, that's why they have a team of producers to come up with content. Most national radio programs have a team of producers to help the host come up with content. Most news stories. There was a movie with Jake Gyllenhaal that highlighted this point. I can't remember the name of it. It was a good movie. Jake Gyllenhaal was real dark in this movie too. He was real dark. Man, he was dark. That's one of the darkest roles I've ever seen Jake Gyllenhaal in. I can't remember the name of the movie. It was based in Los Angeles. But that movie highlighted how the TV news programs that you see on ABC, NBC, CBS, etc., how starved they are for content. So basically, that's what this YouTube host was doing with me, man. But the thing about it, he wasn't just coming out and saying that. He wasn't just coming out openly and saying, hey, Alan, one of the reasons I want to become cool with you is because I need more content for my program, and your books provide me with a great source of content for my talking points. He never came straight out and said that. He tried to act like, oh, Alan, I want to help you promote your books because I want to see you be more successful, and I want to see you blow up, and I want to see you attract more black male fans. He tried to present it like he was trying to hook me up. Like he was trying to do a favor for me and not wanting anything in return. But the reality was that was bullshit. He did want something in return. And again, if nothing else, he wanted me to contribute to the content of his video podcast. And see, because I explained that so thoroughly in my last video podcast, I'm going to tell you something. I didn't hear from not too many, but I heard from, I want to say at least 3 of his fans, followers, and supporters. And I would say in some cases, soon to be former fans, followers, and supporters. See, that's when you know you scored a victory with your YouTube podcast, is when I heard from people that were supporters of his. And see, they let me know that they weren't aware of that. And see, that's one reason why I wanted to do that last video podcast I did. They weren't aware of that. They were basically like, oh, okay, I get it now. I get why you and him are having all these disagreements. And see, remember I said one of his strategies was to make me look like the bad guy? Well, these people who wrote me confirmed that, because they basically said, yeah, Alan, honestly, I got to tell you, initially I looked at you as more or less the bad guy in this situation. I kind of looked at you as the bad guy and the old man as kind of the victim. But after I watched your last video podcast, I don't see it that way anymore. Because you asked him nicely not to mention your name anymore, and not to mention the content of your books anymore, and not to take it upon himself to endorse and promote your books. And he basically defiantly did it anyway. See, I didn't know that, Alan. I didn't know that. And then secondly, they mentioned about what I just talked about manipulation. They said, secondly, I did look at him as somebody who was going out of his way to help you out, and that you weren't appreciative of the fact that he was trying to help you out. That's how I initially looked at it. But they said, after you explained everything in your last video podcast, I realized that wasn't the case. The old man wasn't genuinely just trying to help you out. He was trying to maintain access to you. He wanted to continue talking about your books, to use the content from your books as source material for his talking points. That's exactly what he was doing. In simple terms, he was trying to be manipulative. And what I did in my last video podcast is I exposed his manipulative playbook. I exposed it. So now I can almost guarantee you a lot, I ain't gonna say all of them, he's always gonna have his loyal, what I call his loyal fan base, but a lot of his more objective-minded fans, followers, and supporters, that if they listen to my last video podcast, they're gonna look at him different. I guarantee. Just based on these feedback from these guys I heard from, they're gonna look at him different, at least as it relates to me. I don't know about in general, but in terms of his relationship with me, they're gonna look at him different. They're gonna realize that I wasn't this bad guy who was unappreciative and treat him unfairly. He was a guy who was trying to manipulate me in order to gain content for his show. And see, that's why a lot of women, the women who don't like me, that's why like a lot of women hate my book, The Possibility of Sex. Because one of the things I do in that book is I expose women's manipulative playbooks. And any woman who's manipulative doesn't like you exposing their Here's one way to neutralize a manipulator, is to let them know that you consciously realize that they're attempting to manipulate you. That's the quickest way to shut down a manipulator, is to let them know that you are consciously aware of the fact that they're attempting to manipulate you. See, a person can only manipulate you if you're not consciously aware of the fact that they're manipulating you. Nobody can manipulate you if you're consciously aware of the fact that that person is attempting to manipulate you. Nobody can do that. Most manipulative people usually only get over on people who are very naive and inexperienced with people. You know, they're not schooled in the manipulative ways of people. And see, one thing about me, again, toot my horn, which is why I feel like I had the credibility to write my books that I've written, particularly a book like The Possibility of Sex. See, I know all of women's manipulative head games. I know all of their manipulative head games. It ain't too much a woman can do to get over on me. I know women's manipulative head games. The most predominant manipulative head game that women play with men who they're not really interested in is related to the title of my book. What they do is they offer men the possibility of fucking them. The possibility of fucking them. I can't tell you how many things that women have gotten men to do for them by giving that man the misleading impression that he's going to gain the possibility of fucking them. That's why Mode 1 is so effective. Why do you think Mode 1 is so effective? See, when you Mode 1 with women, you basically come at women like, are we fucking or not? Are we fucking or not? You basically force a woman to either fully reciprocate your sexual desires and interests or fully reject your sexual desires and interests. Both of those benefit you. Now, a lot of men, they only see the benefit of a woman fully reciprocating their desires and interests. But what I'm explaining in my Patreon subscriber portion is how it's also beneficial for a woman to reject you. See, most people look at that, a lot of guys look at that as a negative thing, as something that's detrimental to be rejected. No, what I make the argument in my books is that being rejected is a beneficial thing. So I'm getting ready to talk about that in my Patreon subscriber portion. But to wrap this free portion up, which is again is the longest, absolutely by double the longest free portion I've done. That's the simple difference between manipulative people and non-manipulative people is this. Non-manipulative people, if they want something from you, whether it's something of tangible value or something of intangible value, they're going to straightforwardly tell you that. They're going to say, hey, Bobby, I am interacting with you because I want this. I want ABC or I want XYZ. And either you say yay or nay. Period. That's how non-manipulative people operate. They tell you what they want from you. And either you reciprocate their desires and interests and intentions or you reject their desires, interests, and intentions. Manipulative people, they're always going to try to find a beat around the bush way to get what they want. An indirect way to get what they want. A slick, clever, sly way to get what they want. That's what manipulative people do. That's what manipulative men do with women. That's what manipulative women do with men. Like if I had to give the two most examples of each gender, men do that usually as it relates to getting sex from a woman. If a man wants sex from a woman, but he doesn't want to specifically and straightforwardly tell her that, then what is he going to do? He's going to try to become manipulative. That's what Mode 1 is all about. If you really read and examine Mode 1, in the same way Possibility of Sex is my book where I call out women for being manipulative, Mode 1, my first book, was my book where I'm essentially calling out men for being manipulative with women. I'm basically telling you men, see, a lot of men missed that. A lot of men didn't realize that until they read it a couple of times. They was like, wait a minute. Alan's essentially criticizing us in this book, this Mode 1 book. He's calling us out. You damn right I am. Yeah, that's what Mode 1 is. Mode 1 is the male equivalent to the Possibility of Sex. Yeah, if you really understand that book, what I'm basically saying with my Mode 1 book is that most of you men are full of shit. You're full of shit. You want sex from women, but you know how to balls to straightforwardly tell them that you want sex from them because you're afraid of rejection. That's why most manipulative people are manipulative more than any other reason. Is because they're afraid of rejection. They can't handle being rejected. They're spoiled. Most manipulative people are a combination of dishonest, disingenuous, misleading, and spoiled. Those are the four minimal characteristics of any manipulative person. Is that they're dishonest, disingenuous, misleading, and spoiled. Sum it up more so, most manipulative people are people who cannot handle not getting what they want from people. They can't handle that. They can't handle not getting what they want from people. It's like they want to get what they want from people by any means necessary. For them, the end justifies the means. They're willing to get what they want from people by any means necessary. They're like, fuck ethics, fuck honesty. I want to get what I want by any means necessary. That's how manipulative people think, man. So manipulative people, they're never going to tell people in an upfront, specific, and straightforward manner, I want this from you. Matter of fact, if you want to know ways to at least potentially expose a manipulative person right off the bat is to ask them this straightforward question. Like, say you interact with somebody, you can kind of at least halfway sense that this person is a manipulative type person. Just ask that person, say, what do you want from me? Seriously, I ask people that question a lot. Say, what do you want from me? What do you want from me? If people start stuttering and fumbling over the words, well, I don't know. I mean, it's just that's a manipulative person. They can't tell you straight up. Say, a non-manipulative person, if you say, what do you want from me? They're going to say, I want to borrow some money from you. you want from me? I want you to help me get a job. What do you want from me? I want you to have sex with me. What do you want from me? I want you to make me laugh. What do you want from me? I want you to give me some advice on solving this problem. Non-manipulative people, they're going to tell you straight up what they want from you, man. Manipulative people, when you ask manipulative people, what specifically do you want from me? All right. Damn, this went way. So you, the general public people, the people who get to watch me for free, you got a super bonus with this video podcast number 37. Again, normally I only like to give about 20 to 25 minutes of free content and leave the remaining 30, 35, 40 minutes of content for my Patreon subscribers. Now, my Patreon subscribers, you're still going to get at minimum 30 additional minutes of exclusive content related to the benefits of being rejected. The benefits of being rejected for my $5 subscribers and up. All right, so this wraps up the free portion. Hashtag. Let me know what you want from me. Hashtag. Let me know what you want from me. That's the hashtag. Yeah, like I said, the number one way to neutralize a manipulative person, first thing, again, you have to be a person who's fairly good at reading people. And you have to be a person who's aware of the various manipulative tactics of people. The thing you gotta always keep in your mind, man, when it comes to dealing with manipulative people, just always keep in your mind, man, ain't nobody interacting with you just for the hell of it. Ain't nobody interacting with you just for the hell of it, dude. Particularly, and I emphasized this in my last video podcast, particularly on a business level. Particularly on a business level. I would say really in general, but particularly on a business level, man. Nobody interacts with you just for the hell of it. People always want something from you. People always want something from you. Just like you always want something from someone else. You're not interacting with anybody just for the hell of it. When you're interacting with someone, you want something from them. It could be something as simple as that person is very entertaining and you want them to make you laugh. That person has more knowledge and wisdom than you, and you want that person to share that knowledge, wisdom with you and enlighten your mind. And at maximum, it could be something like you want money from them or you want sex from them. You always want something from somebody. Anytime you deal with any human being on a regular or semi-regular basis, you want something. You want something. Just like you guys. Most of you guys, and particularly my clients, I want to exchange my knowledge, wisdom, insight, and advice for your money. Shoot, I don't try to hide that shit. I want to exchange my knowledge, wisdom, insight, and advice for your money. I want you to show me your appreciation for the knowledge, wisdom, insight, and advice I provide you with by either buying my books, purchasing a consultation session, purchasing a one-on-one face-to-face coaching session, or subscribing to my Patreon page. I don't try to be phony about that or disingenuous about that. I'm upfront. I don't want to do shit for free. I don't want to give you guys knowledge, wisdom, insight, and advice for free. Fuck that. I don't. I'll be honest. I'm honest and upfront about that. I don't. I can't earn no living giving you guys shit for free. So anyway, enough of this free portion that ran an hour and 15 minutes. Patreon subscribers, stay tuned. I'll be with you in a moment.
Yes, sir.
Say it again.
Yes, sir.
Who's the king?
Alan, you're the king.
Say it again.
Alan, you're the king. You're dominating me.
Say it again.
Alan, you're dominating me right now. Mode 1.
Mode
Daddy, can I go, please? You're the king.
Say it again.
Oh, king. Oh, you're the fucking king. Yes. Yes. Yes.
You're the king, Alan.
AKA the king of verbal seduction. You know, it's the tone of your voice, how seductive your intonations are, the vibrations that you could just reach out over the phone lines and stroke a woman's breast just by the sound of your voice, how you could make her pussy so wet just by the sound of your voice. That's actually very hot.
So you said my show was what?
I said your show is powerful.
Oh, say it again.
Your show is powerful.
I bet the king would fuck me really good.
Oh, yeah. Who's the king?
Alan Roger Currie.
Oh, yeah. Who's the king?
Alan Roger Currie. The king.
The king.
The king.